Lance Roberts is on the line with us. He's with the chief economist with Street Talk Advisors, streettalklive.com, and apparently a spokesperson for right-wing or Republican political positions with regard to this, Lance?
Well, I'm sorry, say it again?
Well, my understanding is you're taking the position that the Republicans are just fine on this and that there ain't no big deal with this sequester. Do I have that right?
Well, no, we've got to put this back into context. I'm an economist and a financial money manager. So, my point about this is that, first of all, we have to start to recognize that we have a spending and a debt issue. I mean,
why?
When we talk about economic growth...
Wait a minute. We don't have a spending or a debt issue. We're able to borrow money at less than 2%, which means that nobody thinks we have a debt issue. And we can, we're the sovereign issuer of the currency. We can spend a hell of a lot more than we are now. We did after World War II. We had 127% debt to GDP ratio after World War II. And how did Truman and Republican Eisenhower get us out of that terrible debt problem? They borrowed more money and spent it.
Not exactly true, but we can talk about history.
It is. It's the national highway system, the 50% of the cost of every new hospital in America throughout the 1950s.
The way we got out of look. In 1929, we were peaking out at roughly about 130% of debt to GDP. By the end of World War II, as we came out of World War II and came back across the recovery, we had reduced that debt to 50% of debt to GDP. That was done through expansion of the workforce by producing the goods and services needed to fight the battles overseas.
Right. In other words, government spending. World War II was the largest government spending program of the 20th century. So government spending got us out of the Great Depression.
Look what happened. But look what happened to the Americans at that point. But let's fast forward to today. We just got GDP out this morning, flat for the last quarter.
Right.
So look, we're spending money like crazy.
No, we're not.
We're spending money, $85 billion a month, buying debt to try to keep interest rates suppressed.
No, we're not.
The average American hasn't seen wage growth in the last 5 years.
The average American hasn't seen wage growth since Ronald Reagan became president and declared war on labor. Wages have been flat since 1980.
Actually, wages have declined on an inflation-adjusted basis since 1980.
You're absolutely right. And productivity has increased, and where did all the profit from that increased productivity go? It went to the CEOs and to the stockholders.
Look, the consumer debt has risen to 190% of debt to disposable income.
Right, because we're being screwed by the CEO class.
Not really.
Well, wait a minute. Their income has gone up, well over 500% since Reagan's presidency, and the income of the average working person, and by the way, so has productivity, and the income, I'm sorry, was it 127%? I got my percents wrong, but anyhow, it's gone up substantially, which you, I'm sure, agree with. The income of average working people hasn't. Productivity and income of working people from the George Washington administration to the Ronald Reagan administration tracked each other. And
Absolutely.
With the Reagan administration, income of working people flattened out, and productivity continued to go up, and the profit from that went to the CEOs and the stockholders. The working people got screwed.
Right. So I'm agreeing with you on this. And what I'm trying to tell you is that a big function of this has been the increase in debt and the usage of debt and leverage within the system, which has been capitalized on by corporations who have taken advantage of tax laws and profitability structures, et cetera, to drive down profitability, increase productivity, to lower wage growth. So the reason you don't get economic growth and the reason you have an income disparity is because of the structure of debt within the country today. It's simple economics.
In part, I don't disagree with that, Lance. And in fact,
prosperity.
We have, we have a national public sector debt of around $15 trillion. We have a private sector debt of $38 trillion.
But go ahead.
We have a private sector debt of $38 trillion. Mm-hmm. We have a trade deficit every year of $800 billion. It's a total debt since Reagan of around $9 trillion. Why is nobody talking about that?
Well, and now don't forget about your $50 trillion unfunded liability in Medicare and Social Security,
which may or may not exist. According to the Medicare actuaries, there is no unfunded liability because those funds are guaranteed to be paid out of the general fund. So it doesn't matter.
Medicare actuaries are great. They're a government-paid organization, which is wonderful.
Well, if you're going to quote somebody.
The reality is, look, you've got an aging population that is living longer, and they are a drag on the usage of Medicare and Social Security.
That's
it's
nonsense.
It's a function of math. The longer they live, the more they take out of the system.
That's nonsense.
In the 1930s, you had 16 payers going into the system. Today, you have 2 for every person.
No, that's nonsense. In the 1930s, first of all, lifespan has not increased, except for people who are in the top 20% of the income bracket in the United States. Lifespan,
in the 1930s
and in fact, if you take infant mortality out of lifespan, lifespan hasn't increased since 1900. If you simply take out infant mortality, that's the main variable. Used to be that little kids died in the first couple of years, usually from infections before we invented antibiotics. You take infant mortality out. I mean, Jefferson lived into his 70s and 80s. Madison, all the come on, Lance.
Life expectancy is one issue, but it's also the number of people that pay into the system versus the number of people that pay out.
And that's why Ronald Reagan said that the boomers.
Different issue.
Lance, you do understand that up until 1981, Social Security was paying out with dollars, but to retired people with dollars that came in from people who were working. And starting in 81, Ronald Reagan said the boomer generation. Just the boomer generation. It's going to be the first generation in history they're going to double pay. Not only are they going to pay for the retirement of their parents, but they're also going to be double taxed and pay for their own retirement. And they created the Social Security Trust Fund, which did not exist before 1981. It has $2.7 trillion in it right now because the boomers double paid on their Social Security, and that fund is supposed to go back down to zero by the time the last boomer dies and the rabbit finishes going through the python. There is no demographic problem. Reagan fixed it.
See, this is the problem, though. You still have a huge number of people that are drawing off the system, and you have less people paying in. It's a dollar.
But we saved $2.7 trillion for this rainy day.
There's no rainy day fund there.
There's $2.7 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund.
No, there's not. There's no dollar sitting there. It's IOUs.
Do you, Lance? Wait a minute. You're an economist and you're a trader. Do you ever buy government bonds or sell government bonds?
Hardly ever.
But you do know what they are, right?
Money manager. I'll tell you what. Because
you do know what they are.
If I have, of course I do.
So you're trying to tell me that they have no intrinsic value. That if I've got a $10,000 T-bill, it has no value because it's just an IOU.
Look, all bonds, regardless of what they are, corporates, municipals, etc., they're all IOUs. They are a promise to pay in the future.
Right, and the safest
today.
Bonds on earth are U.S. Treasuries.
Look, basic
which is what Social Security is invested in.
Now listen, this is really important. You're dependent upon the value of the dollar that you're repaid in terms of regaining your principal.
Sure.
We are lowering the value of the dollar, which means that when I buy a 30-year Treasury, when I get that back on an inflation-adjusted basis, I have lost money. That's the point we're trying to bring across.
Assuming that inflation exceeds the interest rate.
The point is simply this
Lance, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I really did want to hear your point, but it's a hard clock. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes. Hang on just a second here.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Lance Roberts, you can check out his writing over at streettalklive.com. Lance, thank you for being with us.
No problem.
Good talking with you. We'll be back.